Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. I will be doing the Q&A, so people make your questions concise. There will be a Q&A when Marsh is finished talking. Make your questions concise, and we'll get to as many of them as we can afterwards. And I'm going to mute myself here and get rid of my audio. Okay, Eric, take it.
All right. Welcome everybody to another session of FACT, the Philadelphia Association of Critical Thinking. In a world with such blossoming crazy all over the planet, our group and groups like us all over the earth are still very relevant. We're glad to have you with us. We've been around for around 26 years doing this. We have a big online presence. We have regular speakers. Normally our speakers are during the 2 p.m., the third Saturday of the month during the college year. We normally meet at the Community College of Philadelphia, but they're still being cautious about COVID. I don't know if we'll be able to go back in the fall time or not with them. We will have a lineup of fall speakers to be announced in not too long, but even when we do that, we'll still maintain this web presence because we appreciate people from out of state, out of the country that are able to participate with us through this. In addition to these lectures, we also have science fair awards for critical thinking for young people, and provide other kinds of meetings, including, given that this is our last educational meeting of the year, our next meeting coming up is Saturday, May 7th. Note that unlike most meetings on the third Saturday, that's not on the third Saturday, this one year's will be at Valley Forge Park. We'll be meeting at 11 a.m. in the parking lot on the north side of the Visitor Center. We'll have a picnic there, and we'll also have two short led hikes to talk a little bit about the history and some mythology of the area. So I hope people can meet us for that, and then we'll be off until the third Saturday of September, where we start again. We very much appreciate our speaker today, who I think talked to us last year. Michael Marshall is the project director of the Good Thinking Society and vice president of the Merseyside Skeptics Society in the UK. He regularly speaks with proponents of the pseudoscience and does an excellent job of studying them. He's organized all kinds of efforts to get a rational point of view to things like homeopathy, psychics, quack medics. He's written a lot, big participant in organized skepticism. So if you're here in person, you'd clap and all that, but take it away, Marsh, on Inside the White Rose, a anti-vaxx COVID conspiracy theory ecosystem. Go ahead.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Eric. And it's really lovely to be back speaking for you guys. I really enjoyed talking to you last year about the flat Earth, and so what I'm really going to talk about today is in some ways an evolution of that flat Earth talk that I gave. So you've had my introduction. I'm the editor of the Skeptic magazine and president of the Merseyside Skeptics, and I've been involved in organized skepticism since about 2009, and found myself more and more drawn towards unusual beliefs and how they're constructed, and that's kind of where I am with the podcast that I do called Be Reasonable, where I talk to people who hold all sorts of unusual beliefs. And as I say, I gave a talk. I actually toured around the UK, and I've given a talk to other places around the world talking about the flat Earth movement. And what I said at the time was, while the flat Earth belief was kind of the most visible and prominent part of what people believed in, what I actually found when I spent time around the flat Earth movement and actually talking to people who were believers and going to flat Earth meetings and things like that, was actually that they had a slew of other conspiracy beliefs at the same time, and it was just the flat Earth one was the one that we could see. But actually, if we're going to try and tackle it and understand it, we need to see it in this broader picture of all these different outside of the mainstream, unorthodox, running contrary to the evidence belief system. And I said at the time that as the flat Earth movement started was looking to slow down, and as people were starting to leave that movement, I didn't see people going from there who are very hardcore believers in the flat earth back into the mainstream and abandoning all this other conspiracy theory. I said at the time that that I felt there was a ready-made network of esoteric beliefs just waiting for the next thing to grab onto. And in some ways, the next thing they grabbed onto was the QAnon conspiracy theory. And then, of course, we all got hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that presented a lot of opportunities for this ready-made network of conspiracy theorists to start questioning the reality around us. And so early on in the pandemic, this is maybe the back end or the middle of 2020. We started to see these stickers appearing around my hometown here in Liverpool. This is just taken from a few streets away, just on the waterfront of the River Mersey. These stickers up on lampposts. And you may have seen them in your own town. I know that they've actually been put up all around the world, stickers similar to these. And they're all stickers that are very similar in design, all aimed at questioning some basic things about the pandemic. You know, it's saying, I hope you're enjoying week 271 of 3 weeks to flatten the curve, which is what we were told in the UK we were expecting to have. We'd all be locked down for 3 weeks while the curve flattens, and then we'll be fine after that. You see things like, just like that, we were able to turn off the virus by smashing the television. It's all things that are aimed at leading people to question what they're seeing in a way that appeals to a gut level, appeals to a common sense level of thinking, but really looks to undermine what we saw in the official responses to the COVID pandemic. And all of these stickers, they're all similar in design. They're all put up by a group called the White Rose, and they've called themselves the White Rose. And so who the White Rose are, when we start to see these stickers first emerging on public infrastructure all around the world, really, they're all part of this one movement, which is a concerted COVID denialist movement. And they spread messages around the same kinds of themes. So one of their themes, a heavy theme across their material, their messaging, is that COVID is a hoax. There is no virus. It isn't real. People aren't really falling ill. And if they are falling ill, it's not a new disease. It's just a cold. It's just the flu. It's just something else. So undermining, first of all, the very idea of there being a virus. That's what we saw really early on in the pandemic from this movement. And then once we started to understand how we could try and control transmission, they moved on to the next areas of attack, which was looking at masks and spreading the message that masks not only does wearing a mask not prevent the spread of COVID, if COVID really exists, they would say, but it's actively dangerous to wear a mask. They would say that it causes you to breathe in too much CO2 and breathe in too much bacteria, and it's a sign of government oppression that you're wearing a mask. And astonishingly, these are messages that we're seeing even now. I believe your country's recently got rid of the mask mandate. Here in our country, there's no rules that say you have to wear a mask. And some of the same messaging has been arising around the people who are challenging the need to wear masks. And then once the vaccine came out at the back end of 2020, that's when they pivoted to saying the vaccine is actually dangerous. And so this was the kind of line of messaging you'd see right across the material that they'd be sharing. And I'll come to what material they were sharing, the more of the material they were sharing in a moment. And how this group works is it really is a decentralized graffiti campaign. So by sticking these stickers up all around, your cities and towns and in the public area, that will get people to, first of all, spot these messages that are designed to appeal to people's sense of fear, their sense of a gut level sense that this isn't right, that everything's a bit weird. And at the bottom of every one of those stickers, there will be a web address. And that web address would lead people to the White Rose channel on Telegram. And I'll come to Telegram a little in a moment. And the idea was that once you'd seen these stickers, you'd go to see where everything else, you go to this Telegram channel where all the conversation was going on. And from there, you'd be able to print out your own stickers and start putting up stickers yourself. So this proliferation of spreading the memes of this group. And that's really how it spread. It was decentralized. It wasn't like there was a single person or a small group who was saying, we are in charge of all of this happening around the world. It was one person waking up the next person who'd wake up the next person. And when you're in the Telegram groups and you're in the central places where the conversations are taking place, you'd be reminded and nudged and cajoled and encouraged regularly to become a stickerer yourself, to spread the message, and to go out and start putting up this graffiti for yourself. And so that's who the White Rose were and are during this this pandemic. But their name is not unique. Their name isn't original. It actually comes from a historic precedent, which was during World War II. There was another decentralized graffiti campaign that was run in Munich in order to try and undermine people's blind following of the Nazi regime, to tell people you need to look at what our government is doing. And it was run by a group of students from the University of Munich, Sophie Scholl, Hans Scholl, Alexander Schmorrel, a few others too. And so they would leave graffiti on various parts of public infrastructure, asking serious questions about what was going on in the country, and they would hand out leaflets too. And the White Rose in Nazi Germany started in 1942. By February 1943, all the members and leaders of the group had been arrested and executed. So it was a tragic end for brave resistance fighters who were standing up to this incredibly oppressive regime, that obviously of Nazi Germany. And you can see there in the picture, that's a monument to the White Rose that's outside of the University of Munich to commemorate their bravery in standing up to the Nazis. And it's no coincidence that the modern day White Rose picks up on that movement being anti-Nazi, standing up to fascism, because that's how they see themselves. That's what they see themselves doing during the pandemic, standing up to the fascism and tyranny of public health interventions, essentially. And so that's where these stickers came from. They're a way of trying to spread this undermining message to say that the pandemic isn't real and we shouldn't worry about it. All of the stickers are the same in designs, basically. It's always monochrome. It's the same font. It's very easy to pick up a sticker and to make your own stickers, to put a clip art image in there. They're explicitly designed to be very low effort, very low cost, very low design that anybody could just pick up and do. And across all of their stickers, their messages fall into a series of broad categories. I actually joined their Telegram group and was able to download all of their stickers. And so when I looked through the stickers for putting this talk together, these are the stickers that I would see in the various different categories. So first of all, they've got this idea that there isn't a virus. There is no pandemic. Your government is waging psychological warfare on you. And these would all go on stickers that are, a couple of inches long. Of course, for this sticker to be true, it's not just your own government that would have to be waging psychological warfare on you. It would have to be every government in the world, because I think pretty much every government in the world has accepted there is a virus. I'm not quite sure where North Korea are on things, but I think every other government is on the same page in terms of the virus. So it's not your own government that would be lying to you. It would have to be every government lying to you. But it's just there to sow doubt and to get people questioning and get people feeling uncomfortable with the measures being taken at the time. And then we see things like this. A genuinely deadly pandemic wouldn't require a 24/7 government and corporate media fear-mongering campaign to make you believe that it's real. This argument is literally just, if the pandemic is real, how come I don't believe it? If there really is a pandemic, I'd be foolish to hold the position that I do, that it's not real, and therefore there can't be a pandemic, because otherwise I would be wrong. This is what they're trying to do, and just get people to question what they're seeing, even though these questions aren't really based on reason. They're based on fear mongering. They're based on a gut level response to what was a very scary time for us all. Things like a massive thank you to the unsung heroes who clear the piles of dead bodies from the streets each night. Fundamentally misunderstanding what pandemic we're facing. This isn't a pandemic where people drop dead in the middle of the street. It's a pandemic where people suffer increasingly worsening breathing ability to breathe until they end up being hospitalized and then put on ventilators, and you're more likely to have been dying in the ventilators, dying in the wards, in the hospitals, in the emergency wards, where people wouldn't see you. So because we weren't seeing people dying on a routine basis, dropping dead in the middle of the streets, people were starting to say, well, therefore nobody is dying. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, therefore it can't actually be true. So we had that on the idea that there isn't a virus. Then we have the genre of messages, which is that there is a virus, but masks are bad. So if face masks work, why do the businesses need to be closed? If they don't work, why are we forced to wear them? It's incredibly binary. We see this throughout their messaging, this entirely, ironically, black and white thinking. Face masks have to do everything, or they don't do anything. There's no world for them where face masks will give you a 30% or a 20% protection, and that's better than no protection at all. For them, if the face mask doesn't leave you completely immune to the virus, it's as good as not wearing anything at all, which is obviously a very naive way of looking at things. But when you're trying to appeal to people's disliking of wearing face masks and their sense of oddity that the world has gone through this very strange thing, it's a question that's set up pure rhetoric just to hit people at a gut level, not hit them where they're really thinking about things and working things out logically. And they really don't like the face masks. I mean, these are just some of the images that you'll see. They call them muzzles. They're saying you look ridiculous. It's very much, I don't like wearing a mask and therefore I shouldn't have to, but I'm going to try and back up the reason that I'm not going to wear it with some spurious epidemiology, with some spurious science to say, actually, because I don't like it, it must be not worth wearing it, and I'll back up from there. I'll fill in backwards from there as to why I'm not wearing it. So we've seen that the stories about there being no virus, about the face mask being bad. We've also seen there is a virus, but vaccines are bad. So again, we get this black and white thinking. If unvaccinated people pose a threat to vaccinated people, does it mean the vaccines don't work? No, it obviously doesn't mean that. It just means that the vaccines will protect you from severe illness, but it won't protect you from contracting it and passing it on. You may even pass it on asymptomatically yourself. You may get very mild symptoms and not even realize that what you've got is COVID, because the vaccine is doing its job of protecting you from severe illness. So again, this incredibly black and white thinking, fundamentally not engaging with the epidemiology of the pandemic, what we're really dealing with in terms of how the virus transmits and what it does. Ironically, these messages were available far before the vaccine, so they were really getting ahead of the curve in terms of spreading scaremongering about the vaccine. And we see things like this on this classic meme of the dilemma between two buttons, one being we need to destroy the lives of 99.9% of the population to protect the 0.1% who are vulnerable, and then the other button being if 0.1% of vaccine recipients die from the vaccine, it's a tiny irrelevant percentage. And those two things, according to this meme, are in complete opposition. There's a contrast here. This is impossible to square this circle. Actually, this is not true at all. It's very simple to understand if you look at the actual numbers of this, that it's not true. So for example, here in the UK, we've had about 20 million coronavirus cases. We've had more than 163,000 deaths. These stats are probably a couple of weeks out of date at this point, which means that in the UK, 2,400 people out of every 1 million people in the population have died of COVID. So that's including the people, who haven't had COVID or in the survival lot. But if you split the population up and take 1 million people, 2,400 out of every 1 million people in the country have died of COVID, which gives COVID as a virus attacking a country, a population, a survival rate of 99.76%. Some people didn't get COVID, and so it's not quite the same, but that's broadly speaking the numbers. But if that's the numbers around the survival of your chances of not dying from COVID in a country, what are the chances of not dying from the vaccine, given that they want to say that the vaccine is a 0.1% chance of death from being vaccinated? Well, we know that in the UK, you've got the yellow card system. It's very similar to the vaccine side effect system you've got in the US as well. In the UK, there are 1,800 deaths recorded in the yellow card system. That's only recorded. I'll come back to what that means in a moment. But given that there's been 141 million doses of the vaccines given out, that means fewer than 0.0015% of people who were vaccinated then died and were recorded as deaths, which even by the spurious statistics that the anti-vax would like to use, would give the vaccine a survival rate of 99.9987%. But actually, it's even better than that, because that yellow card system isn't claiming causality. It's not saying 1,800 people died because they were vaccinated. It's saying 1,800 people were vaccinated and then died. And they might have died for lots of different reasons, but you record all of the side effects in the yellow card system, and then you start to figure out if there's patterns. It's not saying that every side effect that's recorded in that yellow card system is directly caused by the vaccine. It's just there, list everything, and we'll spot patterns if they're there. So it's actually far fewer than that who would have died as a result of the vaccine. But even if we granted the anti-vaxxers that 1,800 people had died as a result of the vaccine, it would still make the vaccine hugely more survivable than COVID by their own statistics. So this meme fundamentally doesn't engage with the realities of the vaccine and the virus or anything like that. You see stickers like this. This sticker is removable, but the gene-altering mRNA vaccine isn't. This sticker is wrong for two reasons. First of all, the vaccine isn't a gene-altering mRNA. It doesn't alter your genes at all. And the second reason this is wrong is that anybody who's tried to remove these stickers from lampposts will attest to the fact that they aren't as removable as this sticker makes out. They're actually quite difficult to get off. So this is wrong for two reasons there. We see another series of messages, which is that Bill Gates is bad. That's literally essentially what they're saying across a lot of this. It's just pure conspiracy theory, saying things like Bill Gates. Well, he said that the world has 6.8 billion people, but if we do a great job on the new vaccines, we can lower that by 10 to 15%. Just making out that Bill Gates is the big, evil, scary, bad guy when it comes to the vaccine. That's actually, some of you will probably already know this. This is just a quote mined piece from something Bill Gates actually said, which is the world has 6.8 billion people and it's headed up to about 9 billion. But if we do a really great job on the new vaccines and healthcare and reproductive health services, we can lower that by 10 to 15%, in the sense of lower the increase in population from 6.8 to 9 by giving people access to reproductive healthcare and to good quality healthcare services. So he's not talking about reducing 6.8 billion people by 15%. He's talking about slowing population growth by giving people better access to healthcare, so that in poorer parts of the world, people don't have to have 7 or 8 kids in order to ensure that some of them will survive through to adulthood. Controlling infant mortality in order to make sure that people can live longer and things. So it's a fundamental, deliberate quote mining from Bill Gates in order to say something scary that he wasn't actually saying. And we see this right across many of the messages. This kind of thing I call a conspiracy buffet. So yes, they're there for the anti-vax, but actually they're talking about how once you go from being no vaccine, no entry, the next step will be no microchip, no entry, and we'll all be microchipped and we'll have to be monitored by the government at all times. Otherwise, we won't be allowed to participate in society. We'll be totally enslaved. It feeds into this fear that we're moving towards a cashless society so that the government control everywhere you go and everything that you do. It's an unfounded fear, but it's part of this conspiracy theory. Another stickers here. Nothing can stop the Great Awakening of humanity. The Great Awakening is a phrase from QAnon. The idea that one day everybody will wake up and realize that Q was right all along. So it's a QAnon sticker at this point. We see warnings about 5G and big pharma and the Internet of Things and geoengineering and chemtrails. This is all in the conspiracy soup that the White Rose is fermenting with the anti-vax misinformation that they're trying to recruit people in via. So they're finding people who have fears about the pandemic because everything is uncertain and strange, getting people in, and then while they're there, starting to drip feed them other conspiracy theories to try and open their eyes, they would say, to wake them up to the bigger reality of what's going on. And we see this thing of if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it, which I think is ironic from a group that is trying to put a sticker on every lamppost that you see to persuade you that you're part of a giant government New World Order agenda. Live in fear, it makes you easier to control, says the group that's putting stickers on lampposts that tells you that Bill Gates wants to kill 10% of the world's population. I think that is what's trying to get you to live in fear of the government, live in fear of the New World Order, live in fear of the Great Reset, etc. And this sticker, I think, sums it up. Years from now, people look back at this time and many will hang their heads in shame as they remember the evil they went along with and the heroes that they ridiculed. And I think that couldn't be a better summation of the videos that we saw, for example, of people going into hospitals and harassing nurses and doctors who were on the front line and saying that they were liars and part of an evil government agenda when they were literally, in some cases, putting their lives on the line to try and save people's lives. So that's what the stickers look like. But the group itself goes beyond just putting stickers on lampposts. They start to move into something else. They start moving to other media, for example. So one of their stickers says, don't read the BBC here in the UK, the British Broadcasting Corporation, very well respected broadcaster. You can't trust them. Instead, you should look to the UK Column, the Light Paper, Off Guardian, these alternative sources of news and alternative news media that exists to propagate conspiracy theory and alternative medicine and this alternative worldview. And one of those things that they talk about there is the light paper, and this is the light paper. I've got several copies of it here. Many members of the White Rose hand out copies of the light paper, and it is a newspaper dedicated to COVID denialism. So you can see this is one of the issues, talking about how there's been 1,400 deaths and 1 million injuries from the COVID injection. That's taking it from the yellow card data. When you look at the yellow card data, those 1 million people injured, the injuries include a sore arm and feeling fatigue. Well, if you've had a needle in your arm and you've got a slightly sore arm, I don't think that would most people would consider that a very negative vaccine side effect, but it counts as part of the 1 million people injured. And you can see on the second page there, "We won't be silenced." That's an article by the White Rose. So this paper, the light paper, which is a physical newspaper that gets handed out by people in the White Rose and in other conspiracy theory movements, is explicitly on the same side as the White Rose in saying that the pandemic isn't real. And it's filled with all sorts of misinformation about the pandemic. So masks are doing more harm than good, it says, and COVID is just a successful rebranding of the flu. It's no different to the flu, and that the spike protein is a pathogen and a toxin, according to this particular university professor. It's just a constant flow of COVID misinformation. So the idea being that you start with the sticker, you get involved in the White Rose group, and now you're reading the light paper, and one of your media sources is now feeding you this misinformation on a constant basis. But it's not just misinformation about COVID that's in the light paper. There's all sorts of other stuff in there. The idea that the climate emergency is driven by faulty models and fake news. That there's the second picture in the middle there is about the Clinton body count, this conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were killing people on their way into power. Obviously no proof in that at all. At the end, you can see some of the ads that's in the light paper, including for David Icke at the top. And on the bottom there, this is for a group called Save Us Now, run by an activist called Mark Steele, who's an anti-5G activist who I'll come back to later in the talk. So it's this extreme, outside of the mainstream, running against reality, conspiracy theory is just suffused throughout this newspaper and becomes, explicitly told, don't trust the BBC, trust this instead. So people in the White Rose will be told these are more authoritative sources of truth and information than the mainstream news. And many people will follow that particular instruction and will turn their backs on the mainstream news. So the White Rose are involved in handing out newspapers like this. The interesting thing about the light paper is I know the editor of the light paper. I know the founder of the light paper, because he's a flat earther. He's the UK's most prominent flat earther, arguably, a guy called Darren Nesbitt. If you saw my flat earth talk that I gave last year, he was the guy who had a diamond version of the universe where he thought that ships could sail off one end, go through a vortex and appear on the other end. So it was fascinating to me to see Darren Nesbitt go from the leading flat earther in 2018, 2015, when I was talking to him, 2018 rather, I was talking to him, to becoming now a leader of COVID protests. He's a folk singer who releases anti-COVID, COVID denialist music. He's got a song called "We Are the 99%," which is an anthem at every COVID protest. So at the very top of this movement, we see a flat earther, and this doesn't surprise me in some ways, because as I mentioned at the top of the talk, I didn't think flat earthers would leave conspiracism entirely when they stopped becoming really passionate about the flat earth. I thought they'd go somewhere else, and it seems like this is the case. I wonder how many flat earthers are just following Darren into being COVID denialists now. As well as handing out copies of the light paper, there are also there's been these anti-lockdown, anti-COVID marches. This is pictures from Liverpool, where I live. You can see there one of the guys covered in White Rose stickers as he's putting White Rose stickers on a police car, although he claimed afterwards that he was actually a good citizen taking the stickers off the police car. I'm not sure I buy that particular excuse. And you can see on that same march, people holding up placards, WWG1, WGA. And Q. These are QAnon slogans. Where we go one, we go all, which is a phrase, a slogan in QAnon. So at the heart of this lockdown march, this COVID march, we're seeing QAnon messaging from presumably people who believe in the QAnon conspiracy theory. So flat earthers and QAnon conspiracy theorists and lots of other people all came together under the banner of COVID denialism. And in my opinion, they all stayed together. And so 2 years on from these particular marches, I think those people are probably still in this movement. People have also done this thing where, in order to wake up the public, they'll stand on the sides of the roads and they'll hold these banners that are trying to send messages that you shouldn't trust what's in the media, you shouldn't trust the government, to try and wake up everyday drivers. So people are taking their COVID activism out onto the streets at this point to try and wake up the everyday normal people. So it really is a movement that is there to try and recruit more people using ideas, using messages, using rhetoric that is designed explicitly to hit you at the gut level, to hit you in your sense of things don't seem right, this is all weird, what can we do about it? Well, one of the things we can do about it is just believe that none of this is true, believe it's just the media lying to us, and none of this stuff is stuff we should actually care about. So that's what the White Rose have been doing offline. In terms of online, I mentioned that every one of those stickers will send you to their Telegram group. And so for anyone who's not aware of Telegram, it's a bit like WhatsApp, it's a bit like, other sort of messaging services, but specifically it's very privately secure. It prioritizes privacy and security first. So it's much harder to be monitored, it's much harder to be censored, things like that. And for that reason, it's very popular with lots of people, including conspiracy theorists, because it means that there's less chance that the government are able to check everything you're saying, that kind of thing. And so when you sign up to Telegram and when you use Telegram, you use it in one of three different ways. You can have personal chats, which is like text messaging, one person talking to another person, or you'll subscribe to a channel where the top of the channel will just push out stories and you can't answer them back, but you can comment underneath them, but you can't get involved in a flow of conversation. It's much more authoritative top down. And then you have groups where members can talk to one another. So you're members of the groups and anybody can message anybody within those groups. And those are the three different ways that Telegram works. And all these three different ways work in conjunction in terms of spreading misinformation and pseudoscience about COVID and about other things too. Crucially, people can forward from one of those places to another. So if you're an anti-vaxx channel and you're putting up your latest posts saying that the vaccine isn't real, people can comment underneath them and get involved in a conversation there, or they can forward that post to their group of people who are interested in that kind of thing, and they can all dissect it in a big conversation there. Every time you forward a message on Telegram, it includes a link to the original channel, and it directs people back. You can click it, you can go at the channel, and you can suddenly be a subscriber to that channel. So it's a very efficient way of proliferating information and misinformation. You can hit with a few buttons time, you can send it to everybody you know in Telegram, and if they click a button, they're subscribed to this new channel now. And so you very quickly end up being part of multiple different channels. And in about April last year, I started getting involved in the White Rose Telegram to see exactly what conversations they were having and how this is working. And you can see that's actually a screenshot there of my Telegram at the time that I was putting this talk together, of all the different channels that I was in. So you've got the White Rose channel. Whenever you go to the QR code or the link at the bottom of every one of those stickers, every single one of those stickers that you see on the lamp posts and the fences and things in your city, will have a link to this channel. When I was putting this talk together, there was 52,000 subscribers in this channel. And this channel it exclusively posts one of several different things. It posts pictures of where the photos the stickers have been seen around the world to show that this is a big worldwide movement that everybody's involved in. You can see these all around the world. Or it'll post a link to download all of the latest stickers. So you can download your latest designs for stickers in one big pack with hundreds of sticker designs in it. Or it will tell you how to print those stickers out, right down to telling you exactly which printer to buy. You need to go and buy a Brother QL label printer, plug this zip file in, it'll start churning out these stickers. So it's incredibly simple to get started in spreading these stickers and putting these stickers out there. And the last type of message that you'll see from the White Rose themselves will be the Telegram addresses of all the local groups. So you have your international White Rose group, and then there are hundreds of local groups that you can then subscribe to and be part of and be a member of and talk to people in your local area. And underneath every one of those official posts, people will just start having conversations in the comments. And some of those comments will be directly to do with what the post was, but a lot of them will be people just spreading whatever they've seen that's of a conspiratorial bent wherever they've seen it, and cross-posting those and forwarding messages into there and forwarding those messages on again and spreading in that kind of way. And so whenever you involve yourself, whenever you comment on one of those posts, you get immediately automatically added to the White Rose chat channel. at which point you can then see all of the conversation happening as a group member and see it happening in the floor. So you get automatically posted to that. So you're already now in the White Rose, and then you're also in the White Rose chat. So you've got 2 Telegram channels at this point. When I looked at this, there was like 12,000 active members. Whenever you're participating in these comments, you get auto-added to this group, and because you're auto-added to this group, you start getting notifications in Telegram whenever new comments get added. So you'll start to see a little number in Telegram saying how many messages there are still to read. And I think that's important because when you see that number, you're going to go in and say, well, I'm going to try and catch up. So you catch up on the main channel, then you catch up on the comments. And the more groups that you're in, the more time you're spending reading messages on Telegram, and the more time you're exposed to this kind of stuff. And like I say, all of these channels, so many of these different messages in here are forwarded messages from other channels. So you can see here, for example, this is all stuff about ivermectin. Ivermectin was a very big thing in the White Rose. They were absolutely persuaded that ivermectin was incredibly effective for COVID-19. They were also persuaded that miracle mineral supplement was effective for COVID-19. Now, miracle mineral supplement is a form of activated sodium chloride, so a form of industrial bleach that people were persuading each other to take in order to prevent themselves getting COVID, to cure themselves of COVID, if they even believe COVID is a thing. It's a grey area whether any of them actually believed it. So we see an awful lot of pseudoscience and alternative medicine spread within the White Rose, not just specifically around the established pseudo medical interventions for COVID, like ivermectin. Even other pseudosciences are coming in. Homeopathy, we mentioned, stuff like that. But I mentioned that you get these other channels from around the world. You can see there's a list of all the UK ones, all the ones for the US. So there's a huge long list. When you click on the links to one of these, you'll be added to your local group, and you can add yourself to multiple local groups. And I added myself to the Merseyside group, the Liverpool group, to see what was going on in my local area. And when I got there was about 200 members. It was relatively small. It was a group, so people were having conversations back and forth. You'd see the same people posting regularly. And so it developed this sense of community. You always got the sense of, oh, I know that guy. I've seen him messaging loads. You get into a back and forth conversation with somebody who's in your area. And that helps cement you in feeling like this is part of a communal group, a thing that's kind of growing and stuff like that. And this group was just filled with cross posts from other channels, and I'm going to come to why that is an issue in a moment. But you can see some of the messages in here. You can see on the far side there, the devil is overplaying its hand. It's a priest who's saying that COVID is literally the devil's work, the work of a literal Satan. And this is the kind of material that you'd see in here. So it's not just saying that the vaccine is unproven or anything like that. It's going further and saying actually COVID was a big hoax planned by the devil in this particular case. When I was added to the Liverpool White Rose group, I was automatically added. I'm not even sure how. I got automatically added to Liverpool Fight for Freedom, which was a slightly larger group, now called Merseyside Resistance, which is again spreading the same type of stuff. The membership was very similar. You're getting the same kind of conversations. You'll see the same messages appearing from different people in those different groups. And that, I think, is important because you'll see the same thing from multiple different areas, and that feels like consensus. Because you're not just seeing one person saying it everywhere, you're seeing it from lots of different sides. Well, if everyone's saying this, maybe there's something to it. So it sort of plays in your mind a little bit to say, the more that you see something, the more likely it is to be true, because lots of people are saying this at this point. Liverpool Fight for Freedom didn't just focus on COVID, it focused on all sorts of other things, including how you don't need to pay your taxes if you know this one weird trick, how you can avoid paying up to the government, you take part in the sovereign citizen freedom of the land stuff. You can see also on the picture on the far side there, that is a picture explaining why you need to be so careful about your children in public, because it is this easy for a paedophile to kidnap your child and disguise it instantly. It's saying you've got a child there. If a stranger comes along and throws a shirt over them and puts a hat on them and puts a mask over their mouth and a gag in their mouth, suddenly you won't recognize your own child who stood next to you, and it can happen in seconds. And therefore, we need to be terrified at all times about our children going missing. It's stranger danger moral panic, and it's QAnon moral panic. It's the idea that children are constantly being abducted. And this messaging was appearing in my local channel. And you can see underneath it saying, well, this is yet another reason why children shouldn't wear masks. So it's not, so we've got another justification for why they don't want to be wearing masks. Now it's because it means that the evil strangers out there looking at every moment trying to abduct your child can use the masks in order to facilitate that. So it's this kind of level of paranoia, I would say. One of the other channels that I saw being promoted a lot was this group called COVID Vaccine Victims, which would just post obituaries of people who died. where people could find, here's an obituary of someone who died, I've gone back through their social media and I can see that they were vaccinated and therefore they are a victim of the vaccine. And so it would actually have people trawling people's social media to see whether they were vaccinated. Anybody who died and was vaccinated, it would say you died because of the vaccine. And the comments underneath you can see are incredibly disheartening. It's people saying, well, I hope that I hope her parents are now understanding that this is poison. You know, good riddance. She should have been better educated about it. But one of the comments in there actually points out that this particular girl in this particular post died of a drug overdose. It was nothing to do with COVID. It was completely unrelated. You know, someone has actually verified that this was not anything to do with any kind of COVID. This was an unfortunate, tragic drug overdose. But once that's been said, it doesn't stop the people underneath that saying, well, this is proof that the vaccine is evil. We shouldn't take it. This person died. It's their own fault. So really horrible stuff, in my opinion. So I mentioned a lot about this cross-posting, this ecosystem. I think this is really crucial because it means one message can start in one channel and end up in hundreds of other channels. And it's a really easy way, first of all, to forward misinformation, but also it's an easy way to recruit people back to your channel. Because if you can say something that you know is going to be spread to lots of very specific groups, you know a certain percentage of the people who see that message will click on the link and end up back at your channel. And I think channels that were already posting very dodgy material started to pivot towards posting COVID misinformation in order to recruit people who were paranoid about COVID. So we see things in this Liverpool Fight for Freedom. We see that people get added to channels automatically, and without you realizing, you can suddenly end up in a huge number of channels. And people here are complaining, I'm in so many channels now that I can't keep track of it all. Because people can just add you to groups at any point. They say, I'm going to grab you, invite you to this group. You've got to click a button to leave the group at that point. So you can suddenly end up in all these different channels. And the more channels you're in, the more time you're spending on Telegram reading conspiracy theory, the more chances you have of seeing the same messaging from lots of different places, the more chance you have of being essentially radicalized into quite extreme beliefs. Because you're seeing the same thing from lots of places, it gives this false idea of consensus. And so I don't think it's possible to stay in just one channel. I think you always end up in this proliferation of pseudoscience. And so the more time you're in, you see bad faith actors who are trying to recruit you. So for example, there's groups like this who are a very prolific source of COVID misinformation in the White Rose. You can see there across the channels, these different posts are all coming from a group called the British Nursing Alliance, which has 10,000 members. Always posting COVID misinformation into these channels. People would forward it automatically and you'd end up clicking the button and joining these channels. Well, the British Nursing Alliance is run by someone called Kate Shemirani, who's a former nurse who was struck off from being a nurse in June 2021. I first knew of Kate Shemirani in about 2015, 2016, maybe slightly earlier, because she was recruiting cancer patients to go to a clinic in Mexico to get Gerson therapy. And I sat in an audience of cancer patients while the person on stage who ran the clinic told people not to take their chemotherapy, but instead to pay 20 or 30,000 pounds to fly to New Mexico and fly to Mexico and fly to parts of the southern US in order to take Gerson therapy. And some of those people, I will guarantee, have died as a result. I know several of those patients have died as a result of following Gerson therapy. And this was being promoted by Kate Shemirani at the time. She's a huge figure in the UK anti-vaccination movement. And at a rally in July 2021, she said she had a list of the names of doctors and nurses who'd been vaccinating people because she said, at the Nuremberg trials, the doctors and nurses stood trial and they hung. And if you're a doctor or a nurse, now is the time to get off the bus. This is very clearly a threat. This is, stoking up violent rhetoric, and you can see some of the people that she's there with from far-right groups. In fact, in that bottom photo, and this is the person who's posting a lot of material into the COVID ecosystem, and people were spreading that around there. I don't think COVID is real groups. We see someone like David Avocado Wolf, whose name is probably very recognizable to lots of skeptics, incredibly prolific across the various different White Rose channels. You can see a little screenshot of the various groups that I'm in of David Avocado Wolf posts appearing, so hundreds of times a day he'll be appearing in different channels. 97,000 subscribers on Telegram, but 11 million followers on Facebook. But David Avocado Wolf is a notorious conspiracy theorist who is banned from Australia because he's an anti-vaxxer. He claims that cancer can be treated with supplements, that big pharma can cure cancer, but they don't want to tell you about it. He thinks that gravity is a toxin. He said that the world is flat, and he believes that COVID is man-made. And in fact, if you look at this meme in the bottom corner from David Avocado Wolf saying, you've got the picture of the Riddler saying, just like me, these people are known for their pranks. They call you oppressor, but they own all the banks. this is an anti-Semitic meme playing on the old, anti-Semitic trope of the idea of Jewish people holding all the financial power and still claiming to be oppressed when they own all the banks or in control of the world. This is an anti-Semitic meme from somebody who is prolific across these different White Rose COVID channels. So we start to see some really ugly racist material start to seep into the conspiracy theory that people are consuming on a constant basis. And then we see someone like Mark Steele. So Mark Steele, again, incredibly prolific. All the stuff that appears from Mark Steele has quite inflammatory language. Talk about the mass murder of children. This is a biochemical weapon. We need to be the resistance. It talks about it's a simple choice. You need to do everything. You've got nothing to gain and everything to lose if you don't bring out the truth. You need to, it says, hear the words of politicians and scientists who profits from the shot. Be the resistance. It's very aggressive stuff. Very prolific across these areas. Now, Mark Steele is someone who's anti-5G. I've interviewed him twice on Be Reasonable. He thinks that 5G was invented by not just the New World Order, but by Satan as a deliberate tool to kill people. And in fact, he thinks that 5G was designed to kill people, and then COVID was released as a way of covering the fact that everyone was dying because of 5G. So it was an excuse to hide all the deaths caused by 5G. But Mark Steele is also somebody who's been in prison for wounding a girl with a gun when he was carrying a gun as a nightclub bouncer, and he spent time in prison for doing that. He told me when I interviewed him that COVID and 5G will kill off 70% of the UK population by the end of 2021. He hasn't said why that didn't happen yet, but he does think this is literally Satan's work. But his rhetoric is incredibly violent and inflammatory. It's saying here, you can see that this will continue until we arrest the criminals behind the bioweapon. It talks about, in the middle here, you see this video. And the video is tagged with, the caption at the top of the video is, you when you find the person who vaccinated your child without consent. And it's got a man there cheerily skipping and happily whistling his way through his living room, dressed in paramilitary gear. And when he goes into his kitchen, you hear 2 gunshots. The implication being we should kill the people who are vaccinating our children. And what does Mark say about that? It's not good enough to wait until after the offence is committed. It's better to stop the murder before it happens. This is violent, inflammatory rhetoric. And it's pushed out constantly by this channel that is then being spread around this network of people who are unsure and insecure and are not quite sure what's going on with COVID. And they're consuming this material. And then we see something like Tommy Robinson, who is incredibly prolific across the UK's COVID paranoia community. And Tommy Robinson is somebody who is a far-right figure. He ran the far-right group, the English Defence League. He's a member of numerous fascist groups. He's got convictions for fraud and assault. He was kicked out of the US for immigration fraud, ironically enough. He tried to disrupt a paedophilia trial in order to say that the government is soft on paedophiles from an Islamic background. And he's currently subject to a 5-year stalking order. And he posts hundreds of times a day. And you can see some of the stuff from his channel there. Tommy Robinson used Nazi symbolism here. This is really overt, outright far-right stuff. But he's posting 100 times a day, and lots of that stuff is just about COVID. And when I spoke to people in the White Rose group, they'd say, well, I don't believe in everything that Tommy Robinson posts, but he says a lot of stuff that I agree with on COVID. And in my opinion, the reason he's saying that is because he knows he can persuade you that he's a more reliable source than you would otherwise have thought, and you're more likely to listen to him because he agrees with you on COVID when he starts talking about the more extreme stuff. And he also knows that if he posts hundreds of times a day about COVID, some people are going to click the link at the bottom to go through to his channel. And once they're in his channel, they'll start seeing all the other things that he's saying, the extreme far right stuff. And we see a lot of this extreme material. We see lots of QAnon material right across the White Rose. So that's proliferated right across these groups. And then I saw this. I'm going to try and get through this last bit in the next sort of 5 minutes. So once you start tracking who's posting in these groups, you can see how harmful this cross-posting is. So when I first joined the White Rose Merseyside, at the time that I joined, the first post that I saw was this blonde-haired lady talking about how you shouldn't take the experimental vaccine that's going to manipulate your DNA. And I saw that at the bottom it had a link to the channel it was from, calling a spade a spade. When I clicked through to it, the first thing I saw was a post saying, this is a white beauty who loves her own race and knows we shouldn't be mixing. The next guy talking about how diversity is destruction and the death of everything white. This is white supremacy was the first thing that I saw being posted in the White Rose Merseyside. I don't think the people who ran that group were white supremacists, but I think they had a blind spot towards COVID misinformation that were being exploited by people who wanted to push really hateful material their way, knowing that some people are going to click that link and join this white supremacist group. And we see this right across the White Rose. It was in the Glasgow group that I joined. It was in the main chat. Sometimes what they were posting was innocuous stuff, cuddly animal pictures. You know, this dog or a lamb, I can't tell which, it's a dog, I think, lying down with a horse. But this is from a group that is a white supremacist propagandist outfit trying to recruit people to what it was doing. And we see some of the stuff that's the more extreme edge of what they're doing. So we see here this picture. If you know anything about Christian nationalist symbolism, this is a classic example. We have somebody here so dressed as a knight, bowing down and kneeling with "God let me at them, I'll take them out," with the caption over the top, "Where we go one, we go all." So QAnon stuff, Christian nationalist stuff, white nationalist stuff. This is overtly in here. And in fact, you can see there's a meme here saying that CNN is saying that white nationalism is the single biggest threat to this country, whereas white nationalists are just hunting with their family and going camping and being wholesome, all-American families. And you can see this channel saying any white nationalist who doesn't want to have as many white kids as he can is a police officer, an agent, things like that. So this is overt white nationalist propaganda that was taking advantage of people's blind spot around COVID misinformation to recruit them to this more horrible stuff. And it is really horrible. It's things like this where you can see, you know, the abortion clinic is filled with white women, whereas a maternity clinic is filled with women of color who are pregnant and already have lots of kids. And it's saying that the British will become a minority in their own country. The Great Replacement conspiracy theory, a white nationalist conspiracy theory being put out by this particular group. And it's not just white nationalism, it's also a lot of anti-Semitism. So in this one group, it's saying, you know, it talks about this picture of these two blonde, blue-eyed kids saying, what is Loxism? Loxism is the racism that Jewish people have for white people, and it's the worst form of racism possibly, is what the caption says. But the reason you never hear about it on the media is because of who's in control of the media. So this is what they're trying to put out. You can see that second picture is from a Rabbi Nahum Rabinovich, who's talking about how we need to force white people to breed with people of color so that we can eradicate the white race. This rabbi didn't say that. The quote itself is taken from a piece of propaganda developed by someone from the KKK. So this is not an actual quote from anybody other than a white nationalist who wanted to say that there's people out there trying to get rid of us. You need to support the white nationalist cause. It's explicitly anti-Semitic. And when we see that conversation happening in the White Rose chat, how do people start to react to it? Well, we see people talking about it here saying, well, the genocide of the Jews, even if you believe that happened, the White Rose were over and done with by 1943. The White Rose weren't opposing genocide, they were opposing identity politics. And how does someone respond? I think that guy is a breath of fresh air in this group. It was getting too stuffy and insular. It says here, the portrayal of Hitler is too heavily politicized by Western media. So this is what's happened when people have been drip-fed this anti-Semitism in their "I don't trust what's going on with COVID." You're getting to a point where people are saying we shouldn't be politicizing Hitler. Come on, everybody, let's stop making Hitler such a political figure. It's nakedly anti-Semitic, and it's really troubling stuff. And we see this played out with other conspiracy theories across here. So we see a lot of references to the Kalergi plan, the Great Replacement, this idea that there is a secret cabal of Jewish people who are intentionally trying to increase immigration to white majority countries in order to dilute the white race and to get rid of the white race. That's the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, also known as the Kalergi plan. And we see this across the White Rose in lots and lots of different places, not just with things that people have cross-posted, but things that people are actually saying to one another. So they've internalized this messaging because they've seen it so much, because they've exposed to this stuff so much. So we see a huge amount of this stuff. So all of that was pretty horrible. What have I learned? Well, first of all, I've learned that there's been lots of confusion about the pandemic, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of very black and white thinking. It's got to be one thing or the other. There's no room for nuance and uncertainty. It has to be one thing or other. Because when people are in positions of uncertainty and their lives change and things get very odd for them, conspiracy theory offers them a certainty and a possibility of action. So it's very hard for us to take the action of, there's a virus that we can't see that's doing this thing to lots of us, but you might be fine, but you've got to stay at home and do nothing in order to help people. inaction is a very unsatisfactory way of taking agency in your life, especially if your life seems to be falling apart. A lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost family members. So the conspiracy theory gives them a solid shot of having an action. We can stand up against the bad guys who are in control, whoever they may be. All the arguments of the White Rose were pitched at this common sense gut level. It wasn't for sophisticated thinking. It wasn't nuanced. It was just, this seems wrong and therefore it's wrong. It was designed to engage with people's emotions first and foremost. And I don't think anti-vaxxers are necessarily fascist or right-wing. I don't think that's true at all. I think people don't come into it with those kind of thoughts at all. But I think there are people who are fascist and right-wing who see this disaffected population and recognize it as a fertile fishing ground. They know they can increase their numbers and spread their propaganda and misinformation if they engage first with COVID misinformation and then start to pivot and dilute that down with some of the more horrible, poisonous conspiracy theory extremism stuff that we've seen. And I've seen this rhetoric a lot of taking a stand, accusations of government violence, Nuremberg trials, things like that. And you can see here somebody's posting to say that when your government is trying to kill you, the best way to stop them is to kill them first. The longer we leave it, the higher the death toll. It's inflammatory, violent rhetoric. And a lot of that stuff might be just talk. It might be all talk and nothing more than that. But it's really hard to tell because it's always just talk until it's not just talk. And once something actually happens, it's how did we miss it? How didn't we see the signs? So you have to take this stuff seriously, because from seeing a sticker on a lamppost outside your house, you're 2 or 3 clicks away from white nationalism, anti-Semitism, disguised as something else and packaged and delivered to you in a way that you're more likely to accept. And we need to pay attention to this stuff and take it very seriously. And the first couple of times I give this talk, that's sort of where I ended, this incredibly downbeat, depressing, scary place. But I do actually have an ending that I can say is a little bit more positive, because it isn't all hopeless. I gave this talk for Skeptics in the Pub online in November 2021. And at the time that we publicized the talk, we put it to Reddit and Facebook and stuff like that. And someone from the White Rose spotted it and put in the White Rose chat that I was in there and that I was a journalist who was undercover and I was there to spy on them. And they actually picked out my profile and said, this guy right here, this guy is a journalist who's spying on us. And I was a bit worried by that. But actually in the end, I got talking to one of the admins in the White Rose, who actually ran the admin for the Liverpool White Rose where I live. And I started talking to him, and I just started to ask him to sense check some of those things that he was saying. And he agreed that he'd watched the talk that I gave in November. And when he watched it, he said he was absolutely shocked by what I'd put together, because he was spending all his time looking at trying to keep out the spam bots and the fake accounts that were trying to exploit people, and never thought for a moment about how people might be manipulated by the material that they're seeing, how they could be radicalized by the everyday stuff that they're seeing from people whose names they recognize. He didn't spot that at all. And because I talked to him for a while, he actually left the White Rose movement and no longer believes that COVID is a conspiracy theory. He believes that COVID is real. This guy called Louis, really nice fella. He's actually come along to my local Skeptics in the Pub group a couple of times. And he's now starting to question the stuff that he's seeing. And he said what he found was very difficult about it. He found it all very difficult to see how it all was put together. But he said what helped him was to be given something to sense check, to start to ask questions. And he actually looked at some of the data. And one of the things he said was actually useful was when I went through the statistics around the survivability of the vaccine. And that had never crossed his mind before. And he found that quite difficult. And he said, what helped him get out of this was talking to me, and quote, the way that I challenged his beliefs in a way a good friend would do. And I want to leave the last line here to Louis from a comment he left below this article in the local paper where it appeared. And he said, please be more kind to each other and understand the other side, even when you disagree with what they believe in, even if you think it's totally illogical. It's okay to disagree, but always remember they're human. Also be mindful there's a hidden pandemic, the pandemic of mental illness, which has affected people in both camps. He said, the year 2020 devastated many people's mental health and has led us to the point that we're at. He said the catalyst to him changing his mind on some of these issues didn't stem from people hurling abuse at him or vitriol his way, and all the activism he did, he got a lot of those things. He said he changed his mind because of compassionate and understanding people like Michael Marshall at Merseyside Skeptics and the good doctors who parlayed with him in such a kind manner, regardless of their disagreements with his stance at the time. And I think that idea of remembering that people are human and being kind to each other and talking to each other at a human level is the way that we can help people back out of this. It isn't by calling them names and throwing around vitriol. It's to try and remember and try and keep them close and give them a community to come back to. So that is my talk for this evening. I hope you found it interesting. Remember to check out The Skeptic magazine that I'm the editor of, so skeptic.org.uk here in the UK, and my charity Good Thinking and my other various stuff. But other than that, I'll be able to take sort of 20 minutes or so of your questions, if that's okay.
Thank you, Marsh. Just like last year, it was really excellent analysis. And you give us more than some other, like all of our speakers over the years have been excellent, but you give us sort of a track record isn't what I want, a guideline for how to talk to people, because you're right. Sometimes I just want to scream at these people. Nobody changes their mind that way.
No, they don't. You're right.
So we have a couple questions, and I want to roll back through the chat, because although rarely do I read questions from the chat, somebody, Jan van der Meulen, I'm sorry, I am sure I mangled your name, but he wrote, where we go one, we all go, but we're not sheeple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, not a question, but a very interesting comment. From Scott Snell, who is our kind of brother group, sister group down in Capital Area Skeptics. The original White Rose group was famously nonviolent. And he put this question in a while ago, and since you've been talking about all the violence they're talking about, but does the adoption of the name by the new group indicate that they also embrace nonviolence? It sounds like not, but. Well,
I think they do. But I think if you talk to most of the people involved, they would say, yeah, absolutely, this is a non-violent group. And certainly the people who were admins of the groups would say that. But when you have that amount of inflammatory language, that amount of kind of paranoia, and that amount of kind of the idea of taking direct action, it doesn't take many people for that to take that the wrong way and become violent. So far, they haven't, I don't think. They've been harassing politicians on the street. They've been going into hospitals and harassing people. They had a campaign where they would go into supermarkets here and fill a trolley with loads of goods, and then leave the trolley lying around for someone on minimum wage to put back, as a protest from the fact that the supermarket featured a Santa Claus with a vaccine passport in their comic Christmas ad. And there's some people even gone into vaccine, like pop-up vaccine stands, and stolen some of the vaccines and thrown them in the garbage. But so far, I don't think they've turned violent. But it's very hard to know if that's going to hold. I'd like to think that these days people are moving away from some of that violent rhetoric. Certainly, the numbers are going down, but I also worry that as the numbers go down because more reasonable people leave, what you're left with is the more extreme people who might then start to goad each other into something more dangerous than that.
Yeah, very much like what's happening here. There's a lot of that sort of rhetoric online. And then if something violent happens, they step back and say, oh, no, I had nothing to do with that. So.
Yeah, you can say you're nonviolent and then spend all your time talking about we need to take action. These people are killing our kids. And when someone listens to everything but the nonviolent bit, you can't then say, well, I said don't be violent. You've still been responsible for winding people up and setting them off.
Okay. This is a long kind of convoluted question, so you do the best you can with it. How many net deaths have been caused by other, I'm sorry, let me start over because this is small print on my screen here. How many net deaths, that's my excuse. How many net deaths have been caused by conspiracy theorist misinformation, including nth order effects? I don't even know what that is. And how many have been caused by mainstream authoritative misinformation, such as weapons of mass destruction? And should the attention we pay to each be a function of the body count? This is about 4 or 5 different questions there, Marsh. So
yeah.
Whatever you wish.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I can't quantify the number of people who've died as a result of conspiracy theory, but I think death doesn't necessarily have to be the only metric. I think, and I guess that's what I mean by the nth order. So it's not just the direct conspiracy theory that's harming them, but because they're in a conspiracy theory area, do they then subscribe to other beliefs that do them other harm? Now, so people who, and I said this when I did my flat Earth talk, is when people looked at the flat Earth and said, "Isn't it ridiculous they believe the Earth is flat?" I would say to the journalist who at the Flat Earth conference, yeah, that you can report it that way, or you could ask them, are they vaccinating their kids? You could ask them if they got cancer tomorrow, would they go to the hospital and get some of that big pharma medicine that they've been talking about being evil? Or would they turn to the guy who says he can cure it with black salve or miracle mineral supplement or by drinking your own urine or all these other things? Because I think once you're outside of the mainstream and kind of cut off from society and community and the places that might lead you to sense check, you're sort of adrift and you could start to believe in almost anything. And I think that's the stuff that I find very, very difficult. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is there was misinformation about weapons of mass destruction that sent both of our countries into an illegal war that killed a huge number of people in the Middle East. That's also a very bad thing. I don't know. I can do something about the conspiracy theory stuff. I know that I can research it. I can talk to people who believe it. I can find ways to get people out of it. I can have a genuine, tangible effect. I have a lot of power. I've got a lot of confidence in my own abilities, but I don't think I'm the one to be able to turn around government regimes pumping out misinformation. But even then, getting people to question misinformation that they see, it's not siloed off into unofficial misinformation or official misinformation. Encouraging people to sense check what they find is a toolkit they can apply to whatever that comes across their path that isn't true. So by the rising tide lifts all boats. The rising tide of critical theory, critical thinking rather, lifts all boats, I think.
Okay, is there, to your knowledge, or anybody else weigh in here, is there a white rose equivalent in the United States?
Yeah, no, there absolutely
is.
I mean,
we certainly have, that stuff online, but this seems pretty organized. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's self-organized, so it's. I think it's actually the people who first put it together were American, I think, and so there are hundreds of groups in America as well. So yeah, I don't know if it's been as successful in that I don't know that as many people will have seen white rose stickers as they did here in the UK, but it's not a UK thing. It's definitely international. It's primarily an English language thing, because stickers that are written for America can be easily applied to the UK and Australia, but they're harder to apply in Hungary or Russia or somewhere where obviously the language is very different. But yeah, it's across the world, but it is truly decentralized. The more I've looked at it, I haven't found there's not anybody in control of it. It's not that there's anyone in the middle benefiting from it. It's one person waking up another person and sort of spiraling in that kind of way. But yeah, it's definitely in America too.
Interesting. And I spend very little time online. I'm not on Facebook, and I don't look at the news much online. So there could be a whole lot of stuff going on.
And you haven't seen any of the stickers on the streets or anything like that?
Well, not in I go into Philadelphia. I live in New Jersey, but I go into Philadelphia. Not in the sections in Philadelphia that I go to. I have not seen it. Wasn't looking for it. Don't always look at the telephone poles. So I'm interested in what new restaurants are in there. So that's
fair.
different focus. So I'm going to read one last question here, because Marsh has to leave a little earlier than some of our other speakers. And thank you so much for your time today, Marsh. This is another kind of multi-part one. Is there anything in the skeptical or critical thinking movements I feel like I'm missing a word here.
No.
That. Okay. Is there anything that, I did miss a word, that the skeptical movement can learn from the conspiracy theorists' use of stickers, telegrams, online channels, and in-person events that could help us promote accurate science? I think that's kind of what you do.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in terms of the tactics that they use, I don't think they're tactics we should be employing. And I've talked to people who've said, well, these stickers are so successful, maybe we should do that as well. But I think the problem is when what you're trying to get people to accept or prioritize is kind of understanding how things might not be as flashy as the conspiracy theory, and things actually might have a much more mundane explanation. I don't think you do that very well by vandalizing and graffitiing and things like that, because I think it comes with a negative connotation that people who are trying to question the government and think they're standing up to the government and standing up to the mainstream will probably be much more willing to accept graffiti as a cost of that. Whereas I think if you're saying actually we need to be a bit more sensible and reasonable and you're boring about this, then it's quite hard to do that with graffiti.
I agree.
I think what we can learn, for me, what I learn from it, and what I learn all the time when I spend talking to people who believe in unusual and extreme ideas, is we learn how people can fall to things that aren't true, and you learn better techniques for helping them question that and helping them sense check that. I think that's what I think we can learn from it. So it's not copycatting their tactics, because I think those tactics are they're sort of designed to proliferate conspiracy theory and not designed to proliferate nuance. So the idea of this proliferation of online spaces, I think, works very well when what you're saying is, this is the truth they don't want you to know. But it doesn't work as well when you're saying this is the truth that they accept is true and we think is true and is pretty much backed by evidence, but is largely uncontroversial, not that surprising, and definitely not that sexy. That stuff doesn't go viral in the same kind of way. So I don't think we can learn from the tactics, but I think what we can do is understand the people who are going to be who might one day end up in very extreme pseudoscience positions. Don't jump straight to the extreme. They start at the entry points. And I think by looking at things like the White Rose, we can understand what those entry points are and arm ourselves with the tools to deconstruct those entry points so that people, when they then come across them, they're not as persuasive. That gut level thinking that I say is across all those stickers. If we understand what those stickers are saying and why it's wrong, we can then think about ways of giving people, of inoculating people to that kind of common sense view of stuff, so that when they see those stickers, they go, oh, that's wrong for those reasons. Here's the thing that's wrong about that. So yeah, I think we learn by exposing ourselves to those ideas, but I don't think we can unfortunately learn very much from their tactics themselves.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marsh. Thank you for last year. Thank you for this year. We hope we get you sometime next year. We'll all still be doing this, I'm sure. So good luck with your next Zoom meeting today. And we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and it's always a pleasure to speak for you guys.
Good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And for those of you who are actually going to be in the Philadelphia area, May 7th, we have a short hike at Valley Forge Park. That is, do you want to say, well, you already talked about that, right, Eric? So that is, the information is on our meetup, and it's also on our webpage, sorry.
Twitter feed and email list at 11 a.m. At the parking lot just above the Valley Forge Visitor Center.
Okay,
So,
all the information.
Good time to get outside.
There. Bring a sandwich because we will eat something afterwards. Marsh, It would be great if you could fly over and join us that day. And then we don't have a lot of information out yet, but our annual summer picnic and book swap is June 25th. I will be getting more information out about that next week. So,
and that should be at Fort Washington Park again?
Yes.
Becky, at Pavilion 2.
Fort Washington Park, the same pavilion that we've been using for the last few years. We will get more information out about that very soon.
Great chance to meet other skeptics in person and hang with us, cook food together, and trade books.
His grandchildren in the background there. And from Stuart Weiss to all of us and to you, Marsh, great job. Stuart Weiss, you probably know, he's been one of our speakers too.
Oh, yes, of course. Stuart. Yes, Stuart. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Stuart.
We'll be having him soon. So it's, in some ways, it's a small community, even though it's international. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone, for being on. And thank you, Michael, for sharing all that with us.